We mentioned, the FOBTs are going to be limited to stakes of only £2, whereas before they were much higher at 50 times that number. Simon, let me ask you first, Mr. Oaten, not Mr. Collins. What effect is this going to have? Because there's been a lot of press leading up to this where the bookies are saying this is going to shut down half the shops, we're going to have thousands of people unemployed, and this is going to be terrible for the UK economy, and it's just a nanny state mothering the population where it doesn't need to be mothered. What is your opinion on the economic outcome of this decision?
Well, clearly FOBTs generate a significant amount of revenue for retail bookmakers, so it will have an impact on retail bookmaking from a scale perspective. Whether it's going to have a significant detrimental effect on the UK economy, I think as the UK economy as a whole, the answer to that question in the round is probably no, within the context of the scale of the UK economy, but it will have an impact on the tax revenue generated from gaming, and that's why one of the reasons the debate that has been relatively well reported over the last few months between Treasury and DCMS, the interplay between remote gaming duty, which was also announced as going to increase, and so within this audience will have a greater impact than the FOBT stake change itself. What it increases to is unknown yet, but it's currently obviously at 15%, so whether that increases to 20% or 25%, I've certainly seen scenarios with both of those outcomes modelled, and that will really have a further impact on gaming and online gaming, and there are other amendments and suggested proposed changes embedded in the announcement this morning with regards to online gaming and limitations on staking prior to the completion of further KYC. So I think it's a package of changes that will have an impact on both retail and online gaming in the UK. But as is always the case when gaming legislation changes, it's followed by innovation in product, and there will be greater innovation in product in the retail environment, I think, as a result of this, as bookmakers seek to respond to it. But this isn't a surprise this morning. I think this is something that's been anticipated at this level for some time.
Do you feel that this will result in the closure of high street bookies?
I'm sure some high street bookmakers will close. How many, I think, is more debatable.
Okay, so you don't think the scale is anything near what was originally reported, where some of the bookmakers were saying this will result in hundreds of shops being closed?
Well, there are 9,000 odd bookmakers stores in the UK. There have been somewhere between 8,500 and 9,000 bookmakers in the UK for a long time. Those have consolidated into the three main bookmakers, with a reducing pool of independent bookmakers over the last decade, and there will be some opportunity for efficiency and a requirement for the revenue reduction to be matched with some form of cost reduction, and store closure will form part of that solution. That I'm sure of that, but how many, I think, depends on where the product comes out. Bookmakers still make a good return on investment on a store-by-store basis, but FOBTs are a fundamental part of that, and that's going to change.
And David, we mentioned potential limitations in online gaming stakes. What are we looking for the likelihood of that to happen, and what timescales are we looking at?
For online gaming.
For limitation on stakes in online casino games or betting.
Yeah, I'm going to have to pass on that, I'm afraid. That isn't something that I've been following. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, on the horizon, I mean, it does make logical sense that if the argument is that you shouldn't be allowed to bet at a FOBT without anyone watching you and making sure that you're not doing the wrong things, then I suppose that the same logic might occur for the online gaming space.
But I think the argument of the online space will be that you are monitored. There's a capability of monitoring you much closer by the amount of time you're playing, and I think the online paper trail gives a much more precise view of the user than a bookmaker has, and surveillance systems have not really been designed to focus on problem gambling in the past. Whereas I think it's much the systems that are in place for online gambling are able to control that better.
Does anyone on the panel think that, and that's a logical and coherent and intelligent argument, but will the newspaper understand that argument? Will Parliament understand that argument? Do you think that that's something that we're going to be able to get across effectively enough so that the population says, oh, okay, we get that, we accept that, and therefore we shouldn't be limited in our stakes?
So I kind of think the £2 stake limit is a failure of the sort of business that we're in the sector to effectively engage with those sorts of people, the newspapers, the public, and government. And I think we're going to, I think we're even more at odds in the online sector. So I don't see any cohesiveness around the online sector to sort of put forward a consistent and coherent argument. So it's been said many times before, I think Steve Donahue's always going on about it, that we don't really lobby that effectively here in the UK. Yeah. And maybe that's part of the reason we bemoan our fate when it gets handed down to us. But hopefully we can try and put some efforts towards fixing that.
I would totally agree. I think gaming just generally is not very, very well lobbied pretty much anywhere. Besides perhaps the Indian gaming in America, there's not been a really effective, at least PR campaign that's positive for gaming. I think as part of this result of the limit in £2 stakes, there's going to be a national problem gaming campaign worth about £1 million put together by one of the gaming associations. But just talking about problem gambling isn't the same as putting forth the notion that actually there's some social good that comes from things like betting shops. In France, the betting shop is treated as a important social activity, and we just haven't communicated that same idea and that same culture, I think, effectively in the media. And we keep getting struck down every chance the media gets. And you're absolutely right. We do need to kind of be more cohesive and work together to actually change the opinion, not just of the public, but of the people writing these articles.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. So you've got the sort of the larger guys who do a bit of effort, and Betfair have reached out to me in the past about helping them with some letters and stuff like that. And when you're chatting to those sorts of lobbyists or guys who help on the regulatory side, they're surprised to hear about companies like Jackpot Joy PLC. They're surprised to hear about guys who are in the bingo sector or the slot sector. So I don't think, whilst the sports betting organisations, the big, huge organisations, are very effectively probably chatting to one another, I don't think it sort of percolates down to some of the smaller operators, especially those who come from more of an offshore sort of viewpoint, like Leo Vegas and some of those sorts of Scandinavian-based organisations.
You're absolutely right. Now, there are more stakeholders that are going to be affected by the limit on FOBTs than just the bookies themselves. One would be the rights holders, especially in the rights holders of things like horse racing. Does anyone have an opinion as to what this means for horse racing, an industry that's traditionally been bolstered and favored by government and the population generally? I mean, people don't like to see race courses go out of business. As in the U.S. especially, you'll see that race courses are given a lot of special treatment so that they're kept open for, I guess, public entertainment, public good.
Yeah, I can only comment on this last topic, and that in the States, the racing business has been dying for years. The level of attendance at track events does not stop declining. Simulcasting has made a huge difference, and has been the only thing that's enabled these tracks to stay alive. There's been a tremendous consolidation among the track ownership, so there's 2 or 3 companies that really have most of the tracks, and those companies have also gotten into the technology side to bolster their revenues, and one of them, Churchill Downs in particular, has gone into the casino business, and I think half of their revenues, or not more, now come from regular casino gaming, and we've also seen at the U.S. tracks what they've done. Remember, in the U.S. it's state by state, So it's kind of like looking at a country here, and that's a state there. It's over 300 million people in 50 states in the United States, and there's about, I guess there's about 40 states that have legalized gambling, and even more when you take into account tribal casinos. But as it relates to the tracks and fixed odds betting terminals, which we affectionately call slot machines, they've added, in many places, they've added slots to tracks. They call them racinos, and those have turned essentially have made a dramatic impact on those places, and those tracks now generate most of their profits from their slot machines. So you might see more of that sort of thing here, blending of the business. But the casino business there is very different than it is here. We don't have betting shops.
And this is a good segue